Welcome to Property Pulse with EZI Properties. We're joined by Andre again today, and today a home buyer's guide to home ownership. Andre, welcome back.
Thank you, and thank you for having us.
So, Andre, if the listeners are in the same position as me, I have questions about purchasing a home. If I was looking to buy a home today, what would this process entail?
Well, Leon, it's a good question. Obviously, with buying a property, I believe that finding the right home sort of starts with finding the right property practitioner. If you've got the right real estate agent that can match properties to your need, that is absolutely worth gold. I would also suggest that people get pre-qualified. Pre-qualification can help you find your dream home. We'll cover that in our next question as well. But getting pre-qualified, helps a lot in terms of when you want to make an offer, which is sort of the next step. You need to know about the process on the agreement of sale, including the offer. So you'll make an offer on a property, then you'll apply for a bond. How to apply, we'll address that a little bit later. Then really it's just the steps involved in transferring your new home into your name. And, if you want to get all of this right, contact an EZI Property professional. Our real estate agents are well trained, and obviously that you are in secure hands.
Okay, so Andre, talking about getting pre-qualified, how does this actually help me as a buyer?
Yeah, it gives you financial clarity. If you, in actual fact, know exactly what amount you qualify for, it means that you're not going to go and put in offers on properties that are out of your price range. We often find that people are trying to buy properties and they do not qualify. So when you are pre-qualified, it also helps you, and it shows people that you are a serious buyer. Now, this is an important factor, because once you understand your financial capacity, you are in a position to, in actual fact, make a purchase. In order to streamline your home buying process, being pre-qualified actually helps you in the search of properties within your budget. It also makes then your home loan application a lot smoother, because you have done what is needed to do. Generally, some of the better home loan companies actually do a whole assessment and also they check your ITC record, which is important because often those are missed. The legislation, the NCA, the National Credit Act, makes clear provision for you to actually purchase up to 30% of your joint income, depending, of course, on your expenses. So they really look at affordability. And if those assessments are not well done, so often those are just quickly done through a bank online and so forth. You qualify for 1.9 million. And then when we submit to the banks your application and all your expenditure and things like that, we've had instances then somebody only qualifies for 800,000 Rand. Now, this is significant because it's important that this is done correctly from the word go. And then that certificate that we issue, or the bond originators in actual fact issue to you, is valid for 90 days. So it gives you more than enough time to find the right property for you.
Okay, and if I found the right property and make an offer to purchase, what happens from there, Andre? So
once you've in actual fact made the actual offer, okay, the process really entails that your offer will be accepted. Thereafter, once it is accepted, it will go in, to the bond originator, unless you're buying for cash. That process, can take 1 or 2 days, depending on how quickly you basically participate and send in the necessary documentation that is required by the bond originator or the bank. Generally there, we're talking about the last 3 months bank statements, and I'm specifically referring here to people that are working for an employer, because it's very different for somebody that is self-employed. So somebody that's employed, they literally have to give us 3 months bank statements and 3 months worth of payslips. The sooner you do that, The quickest turnaround time that we've ever had on the approval of a bond is literally, now that's quite quick, knowing that you've got an approval in principle and you can proceed with your purchase of your property. So that is important. So once you've made the offer to purchase, is to get in contact with either the bond originator, the bank, and make sure that you submit everything as quickly as possible. There's provisions normally in the contract that stipulates that this needs to happen within a specific period in time. So that's quite important. You normally get 3 to 4 weeks, depending, and this varies between companies, it varies between estate agents. You may get 2 weeks, if it's a person that is employed. If it's self-employed, there's a lot more that needs to go in. Those normally, generally, we provide anything from 6 to 8 weeks or longer. Sometimes we have to extend the offer in order for them to provide, details on financials or clarify certain things through their accountants and so forth. So that does take a little bit longer, but that would be the process.
Okay, and what is the process of applying for my bond?
Yeah, that is a good question, because ultimately there are a few things that you need to keep in mind. The process of applying for a bond, as I've mentioned just now, is literally as providing them with the right information and do that as quickly as possible. Then either if you're going to submit it through a bank or through a bond originator, they will then issue firstly what is known as an approval in principle. So once you've received the approval in principle, the banks would actually go and do a valuation on the property. Thereafter, they will give you a final quotation or a final bond grant that needs to be signed and accepted prior to the date of expiry normally on the contract. Some contracts actually allow, and I'm talking about the offer to purchase, that the wording has been changed where it makes provision that at the time of receiving an approval in principle, at that time the transaction vests, which means you are tied to the contract, you are tied to paying the estate agent's commission. So important to understand the process that is involved. Once your bond has been granted, then obviously the bank will appoint a bond registration attorney. There are in fact 3 attorneys involved in the process of buying a property. So firstly, you have the seller that nominates the transferring attorney. You then have the bank that appoints the bond registration attorney. And if there is still a bond over the property, an instruction will go to an attorney to cancel that bond. So there's, generally speaking, 3 attorneys involved in any transaction. So there's a lot that estate agents need to keep together in order to make sure that you get your dream home.
Sure, very, very interesting. Andre, could you explain the process of transferring the property onto my name?
Yeah, that is an area I love to talk about. Now, once you've received your bond, then everything changes from that particular point in time. It is specific milestones that need to be achieved. There are specific things that need to happen from there. So let's firstly deal with sectional title. So once the bond approvals are done, obviously the attorneys, the bond registration attorneys, needs to then issue a guarantee for payment to the transferring attorneys for the settlement, and also the payment if they were appointed for the settlement, and also the payment of funds at the moment of transfer. So specifically on sectional title, a few things needs to happen from that point. There is a clearance certificate that needs to be issued by the managing agent in terms of the levies. You also need a clearance certificate to be issued by the council, the municipal council, that says the rates, taxes, water, electricity, and all those type of things. They normally take a 3 or 4 month forward view, and those need to be settled. This is payable by the seller in advance, right? And once that is done and they've got all of that, then they will also get a certificate from SARS that all parties are in good standing with SARS. Otherwise, if the seller owes them money and they're getting funds from the proceeds, then they will lay claim on it. If the estate agent even and the purchaser has outstanding tax returns, they will stop the transaction until those are done. So it's important that you follow the due process. So in the case of a house, then obviously the levy certificate, the clearance certificate is not required. Some areas, and depending on where you are in South Africa, there are a couple of other certificates that may be applicable. It could be that you need a plumber's certificate, which really the condition of pipes and so forth. Then it could be like in Natal, mostly coastal areas, or KZN for that matter, you need a beetle certificate. So over and above the normal compliance certificates that's required for electricity and so forth, these need to be in place. I did mention in a previous talk also the importance of the property condition report. So those also need to be in place. I'd like to tell the listeners that also it is very, very important, because there is a requirement by legislation that is called the Spluma Act. So in short, I'm not going to give you the long name, but it's the Spatial Land Planning Act. So that just effectively means municipalities have to confirm that your plans are still exactly the same as what the property is. Now, this is an interesting thing. So in Gauteng, we've had some fires, at municipal buildings. We've had problems where they've had water damage. So before the fact that they had placed all of these things on microfiche, they can't really check them. So there's a reason why they haven't implemented it in Gauteng. But when it comes to Mpumalanga, Cape Region, and so forth, these guys are asking for the Spluma certificate. You cannot proceed without the certificate. And that just means that they've confirmed that your property on the ground is still the same as the plans on record. This is a good thing, because typically South African, most of us had taken the opportunity and we've added onto our properties without the proper approval and planning. So it's a protection mechanism that was put in place to protect the buyer. So
sure.
Interesting.
Very interesting. A lot of red tape and a lot of admin there. Hey, I don't know how you guys do it. I'll just get lost completely.
That begs for another question I'll address in another session.
Oh, okay. Now I'm curious. But anyway, I want to ask you, Andre, what are the hidden costs in buying a home, apart from what you just mentioned?
Okay. Generally speaking, the problem is for a lot of people that they don't realize, because it's not explained by the property professional. They should tell you and explain to you, as I've mentioned just now, that you get the clearance certificate. That's 4 months of your levies and all of the costs that is normally paid to the council that you need to pay in advance. It's important to note as well, do not stop paying. It happens sometimes that those certificates expire for a number of reasons, and then they've got to reapply. So don't stop paying them. Yes, I understand it's a pain. It takes 6 to 12 months or even longer to, in actual fact, in the ultimate end, to get money back from council. But that is what it is. You don't want to hold up the process, which could cost you money. Now, the hidden costs, that would be one. People don't plan for this additional 20, 25, 30 odd thousand rand that they need to pay to council. Okay, so from a seller perspective, that would be the one specific cost. Also, when it comes to the levy clearance certificate, now depending on which transferring attorney is used, there is 2 ways they will handle this. More often than not, you will find that there's a clause that makes provision, and it says that the purchaser will do and pay everything to in actual fact enable the contract. So that means that at this particular point in time, they may say to you, listen, you're buying this property, but you need to pay the levies 3 months in advance. Now, there's no right or wrong here. I mean, it just means it's a question normally on how people interpret, different attorneys interpret the contract. So the good thing about that is that your levies are paid in advance, okay? The current seller needs to still pay. The problem is if they don't, then there will be a shortfall, but he needs to sort that out, because on the day of transfer, all of those the risk transfers over to the purchaser, but that legacy cost and all that will still be attached to the seller. Now, some attorneys, as I've mentioned now, would also then say to the seller, dear seller, you need to pay your levy clearance certificate for 3 months in advance, which means he doesn't have to pay the next 3 months. And that means that the buyer is starting from a clear slate. Now, the example I used earlier, if they continue to pay, it means that and that's if the purchaser has paid it, then they will be paid up for 3 months in advance. As I mentioned, there's no right or wrong. Just be aware of it. So the only other cost that is very much applicable and often missed is the fact that you will have a bond cancellation fee. Most banks, since the changes that happened with the National Credit Act implementation, makes provision for the fact that a bank requires 90 days notice. We normally, as part of our folders, give to a client the necessary email addresses that they can contact the bank so that they are fully aware of what they need to do as the next step. This is often overlooked. And if you did not notify the bank of your intention to cancel your bond, you may incur a penalty. In the past, prior to the changes in the National Credit Act, I mean, this was handled a little bit differently and it cost you a lot more. Nowadays, it's clearly defined in the contract that you sign with the bank what these penalties would be, but you can avoid them. The moment you put your property on the market, you need to notify the bank of your intention to cancel and follow up on that. So those are the three main hidden costs that I wanted to cover today.
Okay, and Andre, just finally, what about younger people buying their first home? Let's say a young couple. Any assistance you can offer them?
Yes. There are obviously a variety of different methods. One that comes to mind is that there's been significant changes in terms of what was known as the normal FLISP. So that is really a support that they give people that buy their first home, not necessarily young, but people that buy their first home ever. Now, the housing investment partners, that got renamed as HIP. So they basically provide your first time buyer with a bond now. It no longer is just a contribution. Now, that makes logical sense because through the various bond originators, they basically then look at it and they submit, and in coordination, or it runs in association with Old Mutual. But if you submit it through the Old Mutual avenue, if I can call channel, then basically you qualify for a little bit more. Still, the repayments are, in terms of the National Credit Act, limited to 30%, but they then finance this. So it gave us an additional avenue where young people could apply, and if traditional banking does not approve them, then we can look at this as an alternative. So coming back to FLISP, that essentially was a brilliant contribution to the first-time home buyer, where it also said, based on your income, there's a sort of, if you earn above a certain income, then you did not qualify. But if you're below a certain income, they contributed to your transfer costs and your bond registration costs. So that helped a lot. And even in some instances, if you in actual fact earned a much lower income, then they also assisted you with a deposit. So there's a lot done by government to assist people. We, through our bond originators, in actual fact, assist people in that process. We apply that on their behalf and we submit and get those additional approvals, which could actually help people, and specifically young people, to obtain home ownership, which I think today is extremely important because of the fact that on any balance sheet, the fact that you are earning a property just gives more credibility, more strength, whenever you have to do or apply for anything else. The moment you have property on your name, that gives some stability where whoever's the lender will say, listen, these guys have bought before, they are committed, and there's no adverse reports, they are paying their loan, and that just puts you in a much better position, even if you wanted to start a business and apply for finance and all those type of things. So home ownership is a good thing.
I think also for a future podcast, Andre, just a topic suggestion would be renting versus owning, the benefits and the disadvantages.
I agree.
I think that will be don't you think that will be interesting?
You know what? Let's do it on our next podcast.
You reckon? Okay.
Yes.
That sounds good. I'm looking forward to it because I was actually in a debate the other day with somebody debating about this, and we almost couldn't come to a conclusion. So I'd like to hear from the experts like yourself. But that's it for this week's Property Pulse. Andre Kleinans from EZI Properties, thanks so much. Until next week.
Ian, thank you.